And once again, welcome back. So continuing on with this configuration system for the terrain R&D sessions here, Lee is going to implement our config class. So Lee?
Right. All right. What we're going to do is start off in the constructor, and we're going to initialize setting, which is our dictionary. So we'll tell it to create a new dictionary. So that'll make sure we don't get any null errors when we try to access it and it doesn't exist. Now we need to figure out what our current directory is. Our current directory is going to be figured out by calling directory.getCurrent not access control directory get. Now let's do it so I get the IntelliSense. That way I don't have to. Wow, keyboard failure. Get current directory. So that will get our current directory. Now we need to build our full path. So our full path is going to be equal to our current directory plus 2 backslashes plus our, what did I call it? Our config folder. So this will build our full path to our file. Now what we want to do is check to see if that folder exists. So we'll call directory dot exist, and we're going to check for full path. So this will check to see if it exists, but what I want to check for is if it doesn't exist. So if it doesn't exist, so not directory exists full path, then I want to create that folder. So we're going to go directory.create directory, and we're going to send in full path. This will create that folder in the directory if it doesn't already exist. And by the same token, I can tell that if we don't have a folder, we should be able to create a new file. So if I don't have the folder, it stands to reason that we're not going to have a config.ini file in the folder that doesn't exist. So we want to create one. So we'll call file create, and then we'll send in our full path plus 2 backslashes plus our config file. So that should create a directory and a full path if it doesn't exist. Now, if I build that out, make sure that we don't have any errors, and we jump over to our config folder real quick, back up, just to test stuff out. If I go over here and rename this config2, we jump back over here, build again. I'm sure I did it, but I've messed up other things today, so might as well check that too. Go ahead and hit play. Give it a sec to drop in. It probably should have already run, but we'll wait until we get some terrain. Go ahead and stop this. We jump back over into our folder. We've got a new config folder that we didn't have because we renamed it. And if we open it up, we've got a config.ini file. And then if we go to edit this file, it has nothing in it. So if for some reason you're using this system and you haven't defined an ini file, it will go ahead and create a folder with an empty ini file in it for you. So, kind of do the groundwork instead of having to come in and create the folder and file yourself. Just kind of a nice little thing to have. And go ahead and delete that one and rename this one. So go ahead and hit enter. Now, let me bring that up just to verify something. If we open up the config, you can see that our size is 1K. We actually have information in here. So if we hit edit, we can see all of our data. So if we run again, because the folder exists, it shouldn't go in and create a folder nor overwrite our existing file that we have. If I go back, we can see that our folder is still 1K, so it didn't erase our file that we already had, which is a good thing. You don't want to accidentally do that. All right, so go ahead and ignore. Now, well, I'm pretty sure I said ignore.
Yeah, this is now detecting that.
Yeah, that I did some file changes. But yeah, go ahead and reload it. Should be fine. There's our information anyways. I can close out some of these other ones for now. Alright. So we need to deal with our load settings. Now, load settings can get a little interesting. It's not too complex. We'll just take it in stages. Now, the first thing that we want to do is define a new variable to hold our configuration file. So config file equals, and luckily enough we've already figured out that information, so we can take this line right here that we used and paste it down here. So that's our config file. And actually, let's rename that too. I'm not happy with my naming. We'll call this file path. So this should be our path to our full file. Now, because it is possible to go through this whole system, and this should always exist. So if it doesn't exist, it should be created. But just to be safe, I want to make sure that this file exists before I try to open it up and read it. So we're going to do a file, if not file, dot exists. And then we're going to look for our file path. And then if for some reason it can't find that, I want to report an error. So I'm going to call debug.log, which is why we included the Unity engine in our usings. We're going to just say no config.ini file found. And then we're going to return. Because if we can't find the file, we don't want to do anything else. The next part we want to do is create a stream reader. So this will be a new stream reader, and we're going to look for our file path and set up a new var to hold our setting information. So we'll set var setting equal to string.empty. This will give us a variable that's holding a string. Now what we want to do is parse through every line that's in our ini file. To do that, we're going to use a while loop. And we're going to have a little bit of nesting. What we're going to do is tell it that setting equals our stream reader dot read line. So we're going to iterate through this one line at a time. And we're going to say if it's not equal to null, go ahead and loop through. So we're basically going to read through one line at a time, assign it the setting, and then check to make sure that setting is not equal to null. So when we get to the end, it'll be equal to null and it'll stop looping through. Inside of here, we want to do a couple of checks. We know that inside of our ini file, we have our section headings, which all begin with this square bracket. We also know that we have comments, and our comments start with a pound sign. So we want to look for any lines that begin with those two conditions and skip them. So we'll do a conditional check that says if setting dot starts with, and if it starts with either the opening square bracket or setting starts with the pound sign, then we're going to continue. We're just going to not do anything else. We're going to get the next line and try again. Now, if it doesn't begin with these two, we want to try to parse through it. So we're going to say var tokens equals setting dot split. And we're going to split based on the equal sign character, which is why we're using the single brackets instead of the double brackets. We're going to do a check that says if, whoops, helps if I put in those. So we're going to check our tokens length and say if our token length does not equal 2, then continue. What we're trying to eliminate on this check is anything that doesn't have an equal sign is going to return either 0, or if it's got multiple equal signs in it, it's going to return more than 2. The only case that I care about is something that has a key, an equal sign, and a value. Any other condition is an invalid condition. And my cat's getting in the trouble.
Awesome.
But yeah, so if you hear loud banging, that's my cat. So that's what that condition's doing. It's just basically saying anything that doesn't have a key and a value is not valid, skip it, and go on to the next line. Now I want to create two more variables, one to hold the key. Our key is always going to be held in tokens in the first position, and we're going to have a value, and that will always fall in tokens the second position, or 1. Now I'm going to wrap this next part up in a try catch just to make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to. What we're going to do is we're going to try to add our new entry into the dictionary. So we're going to add in our key and our value. And actually I could have just put this in. The reason I had this split up is this was initially much more complicated than that. So if you really wanted to clean it up and not have the extra assignment, there's no reason why we couldn't just do this. But if you wanted to have, like I did at one point during the process, multiple different types of adding into the dictionary, then you could split it up this way as well. Now the reason why we're doing a try is we want to make sure that at no point are we trying to add in the same key a second time. The dictionary will actually explode and give you an error if you try to enter in a key twice. So we need to catch it if that happens. Go ahead and grab the exception, and then we'll debug log this out as well. So if we get an exception, then we'll log it to the debug console. And we don't need the throw at this point. Build that. Now this will handle all of our looping through each line of our ini file. After we finish that, we want to make sure that we close out our stream reader just to keep everything nice and neat. and then we'll have one final debug log. This is just an informational. So we'll say let's see, config. There we go. Waiting for the lag. Config file loaded, and I want to pass in a number. Loaded a value settings. And go ahead. Surround that with a string.format. And we're going to send out the count from our setting. This is just an indicator that when we're running to make sure that we're loading in information. Otherwise, this will come back as 0. So build that out, no errors. Go ahead, back over to Unity. If you want to run that, you should get something logged out at some point. At least I would hope so.
Yeah,
There we
23
go.
settings.
There we go. So it's loaded 23 settings.
Very
Now we need to start using the information. And that we'll start covering in the next video.
Okay, so is that everything you want to cover here?
Yeah,
All
for
right,
this one.
outstanding. So with that, that will conclude this video. Thanks a lot.